Hi everyone, welcome to all the new viewers to this channel. Welcome back to the old viewers. Today we are going to tackle a new subject, is the old age makeup. I'm the grumpy sculptor and let's go into it. So this is going to be a two-part videos. The reason is there was a lot of material there I recorded. It was over 3 hours of time lapse. It was almost a week of work. I try to incorporate as much information as possible, visual information. I'm not going to describe everything that I'm doing because images speaks more than words. But I'm gonna try to cover as much as possible so you have like a start to finish step by step on like how to sculpt an old age. This is gonna be 70 years old aging, but it needs to be a little bit subtle because all these pieces, or the whole sculpt is going to be, and it's been placed flat. So if you have a sculpt that is too thick, you have a problem with the amount of material that you have to place on a flat surface. Obviously, because you have more clay, if the sculpt is too thick, you have problems because you have more material that you have to bend, push, and you risk to ruin the sculpt. Pushing too much and ruin the texture. Yes, you have to work on it afterwards to finish it when it's on a board. At some point I will make a video showing this process. For this one, at some point I had to rush it out, and when you sculpt and you try to film at the same time, the process slows down so much because you have to think about where to put the camera, am I in the way, maybe change this angle or this other angle. So this one is going to be just about the sculpting. In the future I will make something that will show the cutting the pieces, placing on the board, and texture everything. So our first step is always placing the clay in with little parts, almost like trying to do some sort of sketch of what the final sculpt is going to be. So every time I put the clay on, is always following the direction of that wrinkle or the form and trying to start to have an idea of how's the gravity going to work on the different part of the flesh and the skin and the textures and the forms of the character. In this case, just the old age. But I'm more like a creature kind of person. I like more monsters and characters of this kind. Old age I do mostly just for commissions or when I work on projects for other companies. When I place the clay on the plaster, you see that I use my fingers like if it was a brush, and the clay is really soft at the moment. It's still quite warm, and this speeds up the process quite a lot and allows me to give this more like organic feeling to start. I'm gonna lose most of it. I'm gonna lose most of this effect and feelings at the moment because this is just a sketch, almost like an impressionistic version of what is gonna be the finished sculpt. If you start to sculpt and you place the clay with this kind of waves and shapes and directions, it will simplify for you and for your process when you will decide where to put the different volumes, different forms, different wrinkles and texture, because you already decide the direction, you already decide like movement of flow of the sculpt and the old age. When I reach a point where I'm quite happy about how I put the clay on the plaster, I always start to smoothing and fill in the gaps gently. I don't go too rough because I don't want to remove any of the thickness of the clay that I already placed on, because it's already quite thin. This old age, as I said, it wasn't going to be like an heavy old age. It's more like subtle because it needs to go on a flat board, apart from the nose and the chin, because those are two parts you can't put on flat if you sculpt the whole surface of the chin and the nose. It's not my favorite thing to sculpt old age makeup, because in a way you're kind of limited in terms of like imagination, because you need to try to make something that is as realistic as possible and possible for the person that you are aging. But I always find it fascinating and interesting in terms of like the study of the way how a skin age and why, related to the position of the muscles and the skin. There's few nice books about like anatomy of the face, and I will put a link to this video for this book that I think is really important that you take it, especially if you're a beginner, if you are a student that wants to learn, because sometimes you don't get all the information that you need from the sources that you go and reach out. So research is always an important part of your growth and development. Once again, we are going to soften up the surface. Usually I go from finer tools. I don't go too fine because this will mean repeating the same process on top of the sculpt over and over again with like 4 or 5 different sculpting tools. They become with a finer and finer texture, so it depends. Plus I like to have a little bit of roughness here and there sometimes given by the sculpting tools, because they will keep the organic, more natural flow going instead of making it perfectly smooth and too much sculpted, because there's a problem you can go and face, the fact that your sculpt might have the wrinkles and everything in the right place, but everything is too smooth, everything's been too worked on, and then it feels like a sculpt instead of something that is flesh, meat, blood. I always help myself with the first drawing of the wrinkles. Again, the fact that I placed the clay originally, giving me the direction, the forms, it helped my decision afterwards with this process. So every steps that I take from the first one is simplified because I have an original first guidance. I don't just place clay to cover the whole surface, or I do little balls that are confusing, because then you will find yourself to have this kind of painting, like those ones were for colorblind people. They have the number of one color and the circle on another, and that is kind of like a technique that I've seen used by a lot of people, a lot of other sculptors. And if I'm not mistaken, Stan Winston was the first one that did it. It worked for him. I tried once and it was very, very confusing. I needed some more of a structure in what I was doing, so everything needed to be like one piece, so I have like a straight and direct visualization of what I was doing, more than building up with little bubbles. This sculpt is a commission that I had from a colleague that owns a little company that makes prosthetics online. They're all generic, that this means there's no bespoke work for this. I mean, like, it's sculpted on a head, but most of these parts are going to go, because they're going flat, they don't have any record of any face behind it. So they technically can be applied on everyone. Obviously, everything change and vary based on the size of the face, the distance between the nose and the ears, the distance between the corner of the eye and the hairline. So we call it generic, but they're not really generic. There's some sort of like limitation based on the size of the sculpt. In between steps, I always love to use the blowtorch, because the blowtorch always soften up everything in the sculpt. It starts to give me already that kind of organic, more softer and less sculpted version of what I'm doing. So there's always almost a mechanical repetition of all the steps that I do. Carving, adding, smoothing, blowtorch, rectal, and then the finish. When he's actually everything is finished, I've done the texture, I will use white spirit. But this will be in the second part of the video, like the actual finishing of the texture and all that part of the detailing of the sculpt. Sculpting a line, a wrinkle that go in breaks horizontally, other wrinkles, is not always in every person, but in some situation it helps to break the continuation of the line. So because if you see the side of the eye and you have all those lines that go on the same direction, it almost look like there's like big lashes. So if you add here and there some wrinkles that cuts in a different direction of the ones that you sculpted originally, it helps that kind of dynamic and more organic and natural look of the old age. So I want to cover a subject now that is very near and dear to me. When you sculpt wrinkles, when you sculpt this part like around the eyes and will be later on the forehead, it's very important that when you carve first your lines, so you mark where the wrinkles are going to be, okay? And then after that you use the blowtorch, so everything is rounded up. With the sculpting tool, instead of leaving it like that, you're gonna add a piece of clay to make it a little bit rounder, soften up and filling up the gaps so you have that nice feeling of skin with the wrinkle in the middle. But then after that you need to empty the middle part, like on the side of the eyes on those wrinkles when we were talking about carving the top a little bit, like in this moment here. We need to give that feeling of weight of the skin that is going down, and the best way to do it is removing the highest part of that wrinkle and get to the point to go almost a little bit under the wrinkle that is on top of it, so you create the illusion of overlap. And then in areas like this one that you have another kind of wrinkle, because you can't do the overlap because it's not an overlap at this point, we're not sculpting scales, you need to empty the middle part. So this is because we are on the forehead, we are on the highest point of the head, and the gravity, it keep pulling down. So we're never gonna find like fully rounded wrinkles on that part of the face. We're gonna get all there from the cheekbone down, because that is where the gravity works the most. It's almost like holding a balloon full of water. The top would be empty of water and all the fine wrinkles, where the bottom area, it will be more bloated, rounded, because the water is all there. When I sculpt the forehead and I place the clay down, I follow the lines that I marked previously, but I don't fill the spacing between the lines completely with just one solid piece of clay. I always fill it with different sizes, going from left to right, from right to left, to be giving a bit more of natural, more organic. Again, it's always repeats of the same concept. It's always repeating the same steps, because as soon as you get the way how they work, everything else will go back in place by itself, because it's again repeating the same way. Understanding mostly the direction of the wrinkles, and understanding the gravity, understanding this way how you separate the top from the bottom. The top part will be smoother, more concave in the wrinkles and forms, when the bottom will be more bloated or thicker, rounded. At this point, I like to start carving some smaller wrinkles that are going and break the directions of other volumes that I've done previously. Because if you think about it, every time you do an expression, you have, based on your expression, you have your face that is stretched in opposite directions. So you have to reflect this in your sculpt. The fact that this character, it had that kind of range of expressions. So if it's a character that aged being grumpy, you will have the eyebrows area, and you will have the lip area that is going to be more affected, and the side of the eyes. If it's smiling, you will have like similar, but the forehead area, it will be lighter, because you don't have the frowning wrinkles. Obviously, reached a certain age, the wrinkles are gonna appear everywhere, but this is something that you could take in consideration when you sculpt the old age, to give a bit more credibility and real connection to the character, so the sculpt doesn't exist on its own. Once I found all my forms, I start to do some of the wrinkles. What I like to do is create like some sort of base with create some oversized pores. Just because they break the surface of the sculpt of the clay, and it doesn't allow it to be too clean, too neat, too sculpted. So I already have like a breakage on the surface, and when I would do the pores, it will allow to have a more complex surface that is not just one or two layers of work. On the side of the eyes, the wrinkles, as you've seen just now, I add an extra strip of clay on just a couple of those wrinkles, because I realized at that point that everything was the same height, everything was the same thickness, so I needed something to break that kind of feeling and make it look a bit more, again, natural and organic. It's always the same. Understanding directions of pores and wrinkles is being a bit complicated for me at the beginning. Then as soon as you get exactly where it goes, it makes everything sense. The important thing is to remember that where there's the part in the middle of the cheek that is just under the cheekbone, where there's the most concave part, that is mostly an area where the pores has no directions. They're just like dots, because that is almost like a junction, and from there everything starts to go and moves towards the ears and go up towards the cheekbone and go up and towards in the other side, and then on the jaw, and go slowing down. we are almost at the end of the first part of this video. I really appreciate you guys that you stayed this far. The second part will arrive soon, and it will cover the texturing and finalizing, basically rendering the old sculpt in the way that it will be ready for molding. And after that, I will be posting something regarding sculpting an old age pair of hands. And for now, I want to thank everyone for supporting the channel. Please like and subscribe. I really appreciate that. This is just an experiment almost, and see how people receive everything that I have to teach and share. So please leave some comments, and I will see you on the second part of the video.
you